Let's call the meeting to order. If we can have roll call, please.
Councilmember Diep.
Present.
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Kamis. Councilmember Kamis is not here. Mayor Liccardo. The mayor is not here. And Chair Chappie Jones.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So for orders of the day, actually, I want to make a change and move the IT strategic plan update first on the agenda. If someone can make that motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So let's do that. Let's roll right into the IT work plan then.
Do we need to do the drop of the items, or are those just informational? Yes, I believe on the review of the work plan, we need your consent to move those items to the April budget, the Internet of Things strategy, and the Facebook telegraph.
Okay, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion passes. Thank you. Oh, wow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, members of the general public. I'm Kip Harkness, Deputy City Manager, and I want to just frame out a little bit before Rob Lloyd, our CIO, takes us through the IT strategic plan update. As a reminder, we're about a year in now to our innovation roadmap, and as that relates to IT, one of the core focuses for our work in IT is really to be brilliant at the basics, to make sure that we have the foundational work necessary today to become the smart city of tomorrow. So today's presentation will look at this overarching IT strategy, as well as later our proposal for a citywide data strategy. So in terms of the IT piece, you'll see that we've made significant strides with underfunded resources, but bottom line, this is still not sufficient for our future needs, and there will be more conversation on this as we move forward with the budget. But I am proud to let Rob walk through what he and his team have been able to accomplish with the limited resources over the last 12 months or so. Rob?
Thank you, Kip. Good afternoon, community members and members of the public. Rob Lloyd, Chief Information Officer for the City of San Jose. The current item, as Kip referenced, is an update on the progress made on the IT strategic plan. As the committee may remember, it approved unanimously the plan in March of 2017, and it was approved by Council in May. The body of the work, which was hundreds of pages of analysis, 70+ stakeholder meetings, all condensed down to the one-page strategic plan summary on the board. And the core pieces of this are that we are saying that coming out of a decade of deficits, we want to rebuild the IT organization to support the city in the goals that it had defined as part of the Smart City vision, as well as the departmental plans that we have across the city. 4 major areas that we said that we're going to be requiring attention were how we engage and build our staff, how we modernize off of a lot of expired and end-of-life technologies to be able to render the value from current technologies into our organization. We talked about the importance of cybersecurity and the resilience that a modern organization needs to have, and maximizing the investments and truly improving our ability that when the city invests in technology and innovation, that it renders the results and value that it was intended to. Part of that gets us to acceleration, so that if we get the capabilities built up, we can do this on an ongoing basis and better each and every time. And then we did have 3 focus areas from City Council. Along with the IT strategic plan, we said that we needed to make the progress on the customer relationship management system, that data for decision making was a core part of our organization heading forward, and that we wanted to be able to automate a lot of the business processes, not only internally but externally. On the right side of that, we have some metrics where we said by the end of 2019, this is where we want to be in terms of that scorecard. And the underlying assumptions that we had in that plan were that the needs are there across the organization. We've seen that and heard that from departments as well as audits and partners. We have the vision from council through the Smart City vision, as well as other actions from council in strategic areas, saying that technology is going to be a strategic multiplier for how the organization addresses its service levels with limited staff and funding. We also said that this is a priority and that council said specifically that technology was going to be that strategic asset and strategic partner for the organization. And last, we recognize that there's no city better positioned than San Jose. We have the smartest people, the greatest companies, and the most wonderful employees on which we can build. So we have that wonderful foundation. We did want to test ourselves, though, and say that this couldn't be an inclusive or inward-facing IT strategic plan. We wanted the experts in the field to give us their thoughts, their guidance, and to challenge and push us to make sure this plan really was going to be wise. So we had Alan Cox, he represents from Vice President of the publishing company for Government Technology Magazine, Governing Magazine, Emergency Management Magazine, to give us that nationwide view of what's working and what might not be working in innovation and technologies. Sachit was from PricewaterhouseCoopers. Shisha is the CTO of Intel, the Chief Technology Officer. Bill Schmarzo brought big data into the conversation as the Chief Technology Officer for Dell EMC around big data. We brought in what the startups are coming up with and how we might incorporate the most novel technologies and approaches out there through Vilu and Matt, who are from Bain and Anderson Horowitz, respectively. Those are venture companies. And we also wanted to take a look at our partnership network, and we have David Witkowski, who's an executive director with Joint Venture Silicon Valley. On the staff side, we had Shireen Santosham, the mayor's chief innovation officer, as liaison and a great partner, and then Kip and myself. What we boiled down to, and it was very clear from the IT advisory board, was that with the city's resources and with its personnel and with all of the things that we had on the list coming out of the IT strategic plan process, was number one, you're going to have to be brutally honest with yourself and say what really is the highest priority and what's going to give you the most leverage and the most value in order of things. So we said from the strategic plan, instead of 21 goals, we narrowed down to those 4 that I discussed. And we had some tactical goals that are going to be able to improve the city, not just in one way, but give us ground to do a lot more. And so with their help, you see the listing in front, and we talked about council priorities, the importance of security. We talked about getting these audits and policies resolved. And last, the importance of building an IT architecture that is frontward facing, so we have that digital front door, that the technology we build results in improved service, not just technology for technology's sake. So what does that look like visually? The game board that you see is what all that matted out to and said on the left axis, the innovation roadmap, as well as those strategic areas. We had 2 red projects that were overdue and over budget. We said we're going to pay special attention to. And we had 4 projects that were actually already in flight. That was part of the PUBS project, which was the HR system, the payroll system, talent management, and the budget system. But this was our starting point a year ago. So where are we after 1 year? On the IT talent and building the team portion, by measure, we've actually marked this one as complete, even though there's continuing to work to keep us at the levels that we've defined as important to ourselves. We reduced from that 36% down to less than 10% vacancy through some great work between HR, OER, and our IT HR team. We've quadrupled our engagement by our employees. On secure city modernization and ability to execute, we'll get more into that in the following slides, but on the modernization, what you're going to see is that's where a lot of our attention and effort went into, and where we can show you we finished the investments that the city made to make the create the value that people wanted to have in areas like HR, work comp, financial management systems, and so forth. So in terms of the specific projects we finished, we'll just rattle them off quickly. Finished the HR system, the payroll system, talent management system, and transitioned all of that environment to the cloud. We finished the first iteration of My San Jose, and as we discussed with you a year ago, that's really step 1 to say we now have a layer of technology and a layer of data that allows us to do lots of things. But what we're going to see is some insights into where we have some holes and liabilities and how we are going to need to continue to improve ourselves through process improvement. The workers' comp system was actually elevated shortly after the approval of the strategic plan because of some state audit items. We finished that and with HR resolved those audit items, so helped the city in that way. The utility billing system was in recovery mode. It was a $240 million system that was stuck, so we successfully completed that and are live. Revenue management system, we completed and are live. As of last week, the Treasury Management System is completed and live, and in compliance, we finished the PCI compliance work for the first time and have documentation complete. Budget system phase 1 is complete, but we have some additional work to get more value out of the budget system, Hyperion, and how we use that in the city. Business tax system we marked as red, and we now have it moving towards green because we completed the project recovery, and the finance department has given us the feedback that that's where it needs to be now. And we have the infrastructure modernization, which aims to resolve the 70+% end of life and end of expired nature of our hardware and software, specifically the hardware. That RFP is in review with the purchasing department. We hope to get it out in the street in the next month to 2. So this is what our game board looks like now. As you can see, we've moved a lot across. The green items are the ones that we have as still active and moving where they need to be. So a great body of work still remains. On the red items, they are only red because of resourcing issues, where on the city data environment, we had a partnership and proved that environment out. Now we're looking for the investment to stand that environment up and be used by traffic and police and all other departments, as well as be ready for the IoT wave, the Internet of Things wave that we're anticipating. In innovation projects, we have the Facebook Telegraph, as well as the Eastside Union Access Eastside projects to support in addition. But if you take a look at the strategic plan items of the team, securing the organization, modernizing and executing, and the audits, we're making progress in all of those. With that said, though, there is a lot to still do. And if we take a look at it on a metrics basis, customer satisfaction in the last year went from 74% good to excellent to 86. We've completed an improvement through our portfolio projects office that we stood up and improved the city's ability to deliver projects within scope, within schedule, within cost, and with the department signing off that they received the value that they intended from those investments, from less than 5% to 72% of our projects. Infrastructure reliability is actually still heading down, and as we replace a lot of that hardware, we expect that it might drop some more. But then as soon as we finish those refreshes and upgrades, that's when we'll start seeing that reliability rating go up. IT employee engagement, we have quadrupled, and the Gallup survey folks did give us a nice positive stroke on that one in the comments that they submitted to the city, but we still have ground that we want to make that you'll see at the very end. We still have an IT organization that's built for 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. service. We would advocate that long-term the city needs to be a 24/7 IT shop. It's really hard for our departments and divisions and line areas to depend on technology but not have the support they need after hours and on weekends. So we do think we're going to need to continue to push and invest in that way. Core IT percentage of the city budget had a modest increase, and we have some goals that we've defined for that as well at the 2.5% rate. Expired hardware, we have started replacing a good portion of the network equipment, especially at outside facilities. We still have City Hall to complete, but you'll see that number drop very rapidly in the next year and a half. And then vacant IT positions, as I alluded to, this has been a great win for us. A special shout out to Devika Tandon, who's our IT HR person, who's spearheaded this with us to get that number down. And the needs remain, and this is important to talk about because while we invest in IT and make the progress that we're aiming for, we also need to keep our eye on the ball that there's other things afloat that are going to affect that long-term ability to deliver the plan and to hit that goal of being the most innovative city by 2020 that the city has defined for itself. So overall, the city's IT funding levels are askew, and where we invest and how we invest are still going to be things we take a look at. Building the staffing and skills, when we had the decade of deficits, the fact of the matter is we kept our people and our skills and our technologies vintage 2007, 2008. And bringing people along a decade in the space of 2 years is going to be a good challenge, but I think our staff is up to it and we're making the investments to do so. One of the things we talk about My San Jose is this is going to be kind of a litmus project for the organization. If version 1 was getting the system in place and getting the technology in place, getting the data in place to be able to have those insights and improve things, version 2 is when we've really mastered that and those services really are more responsive, more reliable. Version 3 is where you say, I've nailed it, now I can scale it, and we can add services and use My San Jose as an indicator for the organization, how fast and adept we can be about modifying and improving our processes and being iterative by our DNA. Data security, privacy use, and engagement are things that we've talked about with council, and they're coming up in future meetings as critical to this IoT environment that we see. And last, the key investments that we have is there still is a large portfolio of investments we need to make to come current on our hardware, software, licensing, and the tools that we use, the data infrastructure, and last, business process automation, which is our wish to have an organization that is actually rapid, that we don't have a lot of paper millstone around our neck that holds us back. And that affects us both internally and the way we perceive what we do, as well as we can offer to the outside. Just for illustrative purposes, IT remains one of the areas where we still have to catch up the investments from that decade of deficits. So what you can see on the screen are from the auditor's annual report, where those gaps are and what we're going to be working to close through the budget process in the coming year and 2 years as we can address those things that we say are important. For this illustration, the concept really is the tech debt. So as we improve things, it often appears that everything's fine, but in the background, we need this committee to know what's still in that portfolio that has been neglected, that needs to be caught up to head forward. And as we go along with the needs, the accomplishments, these are special kind of mile markers as we go along to say how well are we doing, and when third parties look at us, how do they interpret the work that we've done? In terms of Intel, they saw our needs and are on our IT advisory board, and they said, in terms of your resourcing, let's donate something to you. So with their donations, we've been able to add capacity at the Emergency Operations Center, the alternate Emergency Operations Center, and redundancy in the city's data center. Dell EMC sponsored through hardware and services, temporary hardware and services, the proving out of our data architecture, which has now been published to the community. And we'll get feedback from companies, from our peers, to then publish a version 4 open source about how communities can build on this architecture and share data more effectively because crime and traffic and homelessness don't end at our borders. And they also executed a police analytics project based on 4.5 million rows of 911 data to say how can we position our apparatus and our police and firefighters to get better response in special events and disasters and so forth. The Center for Digital Government named us one of the top 10 digital cities in the nation for the first time in the 18-year history of the awards. State Scoop magazine named us one of the 31 top smart communities, one of the top 17 cybersecurity communities, and we recently received an award from a local conglomeration of companies for our cybersecurity work plan and direction as being a leader in government on how we're trying to protect the data of our people. The last things I'll say is the IT strategic plan has and will continue to be a joint progress piece with the city departments that we work with. We'll continue to work through the budget process to prioritize and resource the body of work that we have. And with that, we're very happy to present this progress and answer any questions and take any feedback that you have.
Right before that, though, just a couple of framing comments. One is appreciation for Rob of walking through this. He's always much humbler, certainly than I am, and I think it speaks very highly of the work of not only Rob, but his team that they've done in the last year is quite remarkable. As somebody who cares a lot about focused execution, I think the number that stands out for me is a swing from about a 5% completion rate on projects to a 72% completion rate on projects. That's an almost incomprehensible swing in such a short amount of time, and really shows you the dedication on focused execution. The framing comment, I think, is why is this important within the smart cities context? And I think it's useful as a reminder to all of us that what we know about smart cities is it is fundamentally a new layer in cities. So since time immemorial, cities have organized around infrastructure. Typically water is the first ones. And on top of that, they provided services, the delivery of water. What we find now with smart cities is in between the infrastructure and the services that there's a new layer, a digital layer, a data layer, where the infrastructure will talk to us. They'll tell us how the water is doing, what the water quality is. And the customers will talk to us. They tell us how they think about the services or what they want. And without this digital layer, without this data layer in between all of our infrastructure and all the services we provide, we really can't aspire to be a true smart city. And so all of the work that Rob is talking about, much of it is very foundational and fundamental to being the smart city that we envision ourselves to be. And that's why we talk about it being brilliant at the basics, because it is in many ways basics that we need to do. Rob has a metaphor of playing the game, Yeah.
So you get fit, you play, you win your races, and then you change your game.
Right. So this idea of like learning the game, mastering the game, and then changing the game. And so I think we're still in the, this year has been about learning the game and moving toward mastery so that we can get to the point that we can change the game and play at a completely different level. So with that, I'll let Rob take the bulk of the hard questions. If there are any easy ones, I'll be happy to have them slide this way.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. That was very, very impressive. So I'm going to ask my colleagues, Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the update, Rob. This is great. I like that almost all of our numbers are moving in the right direction. Those were some huge leaps in 1 year. I think this is a question for Kip because I think it's an easy one. On slide 7, under ability to execute, you're going to have to help me out with the C3PO team formed.
Oh, that's Rob's. That's his. He's very happy about this.
Yeah, I worked really hard on this acronym. So it's the city.
It caught my eye.
Yes, the City Portfolio Products and Projects Office. And the fundamental concept behind that is we need to move away from envisioning IT as projects. They're actually municipal products. And so once we render it, we still need to own it and nurse it to continue to improve and iterate better. And then that portfolio is to look across everything so we can always prioritize correctly rather than just accumulate things and forget about them and neglect them.
And our first out of the gate, trying to think about things as a product, has been My San Jose, where we've actually had a formal product owner. We've done prioritizations of the backlog. We've practiced release mapping. All of those habits and practices that are good product management, but have not been part of our practice and culture here within the IT world at City of San Jose.
I think that's a really important point. We were actually just talking about that at the Caltrain meeting this morning about how in their world, the Positive Train Control project isn't really a project, it's a whole culture shift. And I think that's what we were talking about with that's what you were talking about with My San Jose. So that's awesome that you have a team already ready to do that. That's great because I think it's a shift for people to think about tech as being it's a tool, but it's also, as you've said many times, Kip, it's a business process that also needs to change in relation to the tech and makes us more efficient as a result, not just because we have the tech, but because we now think differently about what we were doing. I appreciate that. The other question I had was about the city budget, the IT percentage. So we went up a little bit from 1.2 to 1.3. Do you have a sense of what you're going to be asking for this year?
Sure. So as part of the budget process, we had some very clear direction on any requests had to be net neutral. And so in terms of IT, what we focused on were some investments where we could yield savings, and that's where our first band of priorities are. And then beyond that, we said there's some additional investments in these products that we're going to need to make. We tag teamed with KIP, where we're going to have an innovation forward type memo saying here's some fundamental areas that need continuing investment so that we can render that data environment, we can build that service improvement, process improvement. But from the departmental level to the strategic level, there was kind of a gap that's been addressed through that process.
And what I would say is that, at the department level, there's some very clear direction to we're in a kind of a cost-cutting mode, cost-containment mode. Part of what we've tried to do is make sure that we aren't penny-wise and pound-foolish, because a lot of these investments in technology over time, and if you look at the totality, are in fact cost-savings investments. So what we've tried to do is elevate and prioritize some of those within the internal conversation within the city manager's office to make sure that those kinds of investments in business process improvements, in data, in My San Jose, which actually end up saving us time or improving effectiveness and efficiencies of services, are not lost in the cost-cutting conversation.
Good, thank you. I appreciate that. And going back to slide 9, is that why you have the city data environment in red? I think it's one behind that one.
Oh, sorry.
There. Is it because is the city data environment in red because we're not able to fund it?
Yeah, actually, so we've proven out the environment, and it's going to take a certain amount of funding to stand up that both the hardware and the cloud-related services that are connected to it. The range on that is actually pretty extreme. It depends how quickly we adopt it.
Right, and we'll go into more detail on that in the next presentation, but bottom line is yes, we know what we need to do much more clearly thanks to the work of this year, but we don't have the investments that we need to do it at scale. And it's one of those things where the maximum efficiencies on a data environment, as you know, are gained when everybody gets into it. So it's about cutting off old systems and changing the way people are working, which requires an initial investment of time, effort, and resources.
And sometimes duplication. As you're implementing, as we've found out with the retirement services, can take a very long time. So their system is taking, I think, more than double the time they thought it would take to implement.
Right, and you don't want to cut off an old system until you've got the new system ready to go over. So for a while, you may be paralleling two systems at a higher level of cost.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Depp.
Thank you. The number that jumped out at me was the IT vacancy rate, and I'm gratified to see that it went from 37 to 9. So good job on that. I know how hard it is to keep and retain and recruit, retain. I just have a comment because somebody put it before me, and I just want to put it out here before I forget. On future iterations of the My San Jose app, it was specifically requested of me to relay back to whoever does it that we include a section for detecting odor. And if you're standing somewhere at a site, you geotag yourself, I'm standing here at this time, it smells bad. And there's, in North San Jose, there's the landfill issue with odor and milpitas and all that. So stemming from that, and we have the wastewater facility, which we just broke ground on this morning for the cogenerator facility, yay. But we also have Republic Landfill, Newbie Island, and another few other sites, and everyone is pointing fingers at each other. So from Alviso and from North San Jose, they would like to be able to geotag odors, and from that data, we could potentially do something with it. But that was the request, and I'm just forwarding it. Thank you.
We'll put that in the backlog, and when we get to 3.0, we'll come back with a prioritized recommendation and all of the things that are in the backlog as well for your recommendation and action at that point.
Thank you, Councilmember. I just had a couple of quick questions. One is, thank you so much for the way you're displaying the information and the dashboards and the scorecards. I think that, when they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, I mean, it really is. So thank you for presenting the information to us in that format. The project success rate, I mean, like Kip said, really just jumps off the screen. And I know that, Rob, you raised that as a particular issue early on in terms of the lack of skill set and personnel to be able to effectively manage a lot of these projects. And I also see that our vacancy rates have gone down significantly. Were you able to effectively recruit people with project management backgrounds, or how was that? How did you move the needle on the success rate for projects?
Yeah, so that's a question we're happy to answer because this is one of the success stories we love telling. So we were over 35% vacancy, I think, on average for over 3 years. What we found is number one, we were asking for something slightly different than normal project managers. We wanted to incorporate that product sense. So we don't need you to own it once. We need you to help map it out long term for our departments. And we put that out there, and I wasn't sure what we were going to find, but we actually found a good number of people who were well qualified, but like that approach. So by taking a different approach, we were actually more competitive than I thought we would be. And we got some tremendous people. We've hired 2 as part of this small team. It's under our assistant CIO heading forward to operate. But this is one of our passion areas because we said if we can teach ourselves to do this well and follow good processes that are well vetted, well proven, that match our organization, and we can do this once, then we can do it the next time better and better and better, so that project success rate builds on itself once you've mastered it once or twice. But part of that also was the brutal honesty is when we defined the projects, we went back to a lot of those projects and said, what exactly do you want? Because this is fuzzy. And when you have fuzzy IT projects, you get fuzzy results. And 5% is the definition of a bad fuzzy result. Mm-hmm. So when we went back through projects and we refined things, we also heard back from departments. Number one was, oh man, we have to go back through it. But number two was once we did, it's like, no, this is important. And so they took the learning and said, now we're invested. And heading forward, we want to do this over and over again. So you've seen a lot of like finance projects. We've been able to be successful on multiple of those because once you do it once and twice, it keeps on building on itself and becoming self-enforcing. Our goal on that one, as you can see on the scorecard, is to get to 80%. And my philosophy on that one is anything more than 80%, we've probably given ourselves too many softballs and defined easy goals. Anything less than 80, and we've wasted too many resources. And ultimately, the reason why this project success rate matters is because when we invest in change, we need to be able to commit and deliver to council and the city manager's office that your investment's paid off. And if we can't show you this number and you can't hear the outcomes from departments saying we got what we wanted and it paid off and it was exactly what we're looking for, then it makes it harder to invest in IT and over and over again. So that's why this one matters, is because it's our key to change.
And just to put it a little bit, at least in the statewide context, over the past year, I've been involved in a research project with Frank Bennis, former city manager of Palo Alto, around recruiting talent, particularly tech talent, into cities. And we've done focus groups all across California. We've interviewed key thought leaders within the tech industry as well as within city government context. And one of the things that Rob is actually doing that directly correlates with the recommendations out of those findings is creating an environment where, to use Daniel Pink's framework, you have purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And what we find is that as long as we are, we're not going to outpay the tech companies on salary, but as long as we are reasonably competitive on the salary and we can give people a higher purpose, reasonable amount of autonomy and the opportunity to master new skills, we actually become a more competitive environment for some of our highly purpose-driven people than some of our tech partner peers. And I think the way Rob is doing the work and the recruiting bears that out with the numbers.
And if I can add on to that, one of the things Devika, myself, and Claudia, as we do this hiring, we've coached our organization is we're not just going to look for the technical skill, but the purpose matters, the internal motivation matters. And so we are looking for a different type of person than maybe we used to a year and a half ago.
So on the, who defines the success of a project? Is that the department
Yeah.
defines that, or do you, IT, do you?
No,
who,
no.
who defines that?
So it's not our right to define it, except for on the front end. We have a project charter that says, here's the commitment we're all making to each other. It actually takes a signature because there's some research that says that when you sign something, you're more serious about it. So we actually require people to sign it, beginning and end, and any changes in between. And the measure is when we define the schedule, so it needs to be delivered by X, and the cost and the scope that we have in there. And then the final measure is the satisfaction with the outcome of it. That's for the department to say. And at the end, when we do the closure meeting, they're the ones that say, on these measures, do we hit the mark or not? So it can't be IT, it could never be IT saying we were successful. You're wrong, we were successful on that.
Right. Next question is on the PCI compliance.
Yeah.
You had that marked off, checked off. So have we passed the?
We're officially compliant.
Okay, so no fines or?
Nope.
Okay.
And this is Rob being more humble. Payment card industry, PCI compliance is a very complicated and difficult deal for anybody dealing with payment card transactions, especially one with multiple departments taking different forms of payment and transaction. Being incompliant means essentially we're saving by not having to pay any of those fines, and we have a much better system. So again, this is an example of where those investments saving us what. You get to say those numbers. You get to claim them. You did the work.
So it impacts 1.9 million transaction and close to $90 million in business a year. But we worked with finance, and they deserve the credit because we were coaching them along, but they did the hard work. Is working across departments to get where we need to be, and compliant is where we are.
Right, and avoiding those fines.
Fantastic, and even you're right. Rob is humble, but looking at some of these results, it speaks for itself. So outstanding job. It's also good to have Kip, to be your biggest booster. That's very helpful. So again, Mayor, did you have a?
I just want to echo the thanks. It's really tremendous. It's great to see so much progress. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we have Blair Beekman Blair, you gave us a couple of cards, but we only have one item 2, so we're going to consolidate them all into one item. Sure.
Just looking at the portfolio map while Blair's coming down, I just have a quick question. The privacy data and use is yellow, but I thought that was in progress.
Yes, it's in progress. Part of what we've realized is that to do it well is a lot more complicated than we had thought as we've dug into it. With the support of the Mayor's Office of Technology and Innovation, we've engaged a really excellent Harvard Business study, and part of what we've learned through that is, again, remind us of how important it is to get this right and not just rush out of the gate with something that doesn't work. So in addition to that, we've also been developing our perspective on IoT and privacy with the Knight Foundation, and realizing that, as actually Blair has said many times, that privacy needs to be one of those solid things that you've got before you deploy IoT at scale. And so what you'll see is that we'll come back through in the both the budget and the policy prioritization with a little bit clearer framework, but what we've realized is we wouldn't be fair to ourselves greenlighting it because it's a bigger piece of work than we realize and requires a extensive engagement in order to do well, and we're not fully resourced for that yet.
So are we still scoping it?
Oh yeah, we're still continuing to work. We're moving forward. We've got some teams working on it and are doing the work that's necessary, but that was our recognition to ourselves that we're not ready to do it at the level that it deserves yet.
Okay. I don't know if this is the time for committee member requests, but I would love to have a more in-depth update on that as it progresses.
Yes, and we'll be coming back in April to the committee with a full conversation on the privacy policy because
Perfect.
it is so important, but we'd happy to brief you before then as well.
Thank you.
Hi, Blair?
Thank you for those last words. I guess to speak on this item, I'm trying to learn an interesting thing is how to talk about things in terms of privacy policy versus public guidelines. And it seems like what you've developed here is there's a lot of internal data projects and analytics and all that kind of stuff. And to me, there's been a big deal made at County of Santa Clara these days about a new privacy policy structure. And they've gotten a new representative to work on those things. And so I imagine you've been talking with them, trying to make sure on an internal level this stuff is secure and is not being hacked and won't be hacked and all that kind of stuff. I'm in my own little world learning to define that as a privacy policy process. And what I like to concentrate on myself, what I understand better is ideas of the public guideline process, which is a more overall idea of how to talk about the community involvement in specific civil protections and civil rights issues associated with the technology. I've noticed you have audits for technology deployments that you're working on. Thank you for that. And you've just had a nice conversation and that you'll bring back to the April meetings that's just vitally important to talk about to how to make this a more public process. And it takes trust, and I hope this can be the year that things can be easier to talk about in those terms. And I guess that's all. I'll learn how to talk about my differences better between privacy and public policy, but it all falls under the public guideline process that we're all doing something for the public good. And thank you.
Thank you, Blair. The mayor actually has a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, couldn't resist. Rob, again, this is really impressive, so thank you. Just looking at this portfolio map and where we've got challenges in the city data environment, is that fundamentally a resource issue?
It is.
Okay, so I know we've been having some conversations offline as we enter into the budget process coming up. In your mind, sort of what are the lower hanging fruit that you think are particularly important that have a broad impact in the organization within that?
So I would say there's three pieces that are the essential fruit. I can't necessarily say they're low-hanging because we've taken care of that architecture to say here's how we're going to approach it, and that's a very clear-cut path. One is the distinction, and this relates to Blair's comments, is that privacy doesn't equal security. They're connected and essentially must be joined, but the privacy conversation is a broader one, and it requires some engagement and some legal interpretation, and the work that Shireen channeled the Harvard folks were very clear about this, and some of this hasn't even been figured out yet. There's going to be some new law around this potentially. Number two is there's a lot of potential use in existing areas. So crime data, we have housing data, we have planning and development data. We can use a lot of those things for disaster prediction and those types of things. So existing data sets where if we pull them together and we respect that smart cities is by definition cross-domain, once you put those together and they're good data sets and they're of quality, you can have insights and analytics into that open up new decisions and give you better insights than you've ever had before. The last piece is the crush of IoT that we're seeing, the Internet of Things. There's going to be billions more devices. There's going to be petabytes more data. How do we manage that scale? And that's why this one also is somewhat hard to predict, because as departments adopt it, it's hard to see how fast they'll adopt and what. And so the scaling issue is going to be one that we're going to have to figure out very quickly as it happens. So I can't say there's any low-hanging fruit, but we see some essential areas where the initial investment is going to allow us to at least build that foundation and put us on a path where we can grow as a city or needs to.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
It does. It sounds all very expensive. So, so yeah, that'll be a topic of active discussion. Kip, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is an expense, and part of what we're doing right now is also quantifying the savings that result from it, because they're both operational efficiencies with shutting down redundant data centers, and we've already seen dramatic efficiencies in terms of diverting or rediverting wasted resources. The example I like to use is during the flood, we were essentially incapable of matching the permit information that we had and the people who need information that we had without doing a brute force manual piece that cost us hundreds of hours of time. That would be something that would be automatically available or very quickly available in this new environment and save those hundreds of hours. So we're trying to, as we look at the investments, to try to prioritize those which are the highest on cost savings and have a fairly quick return on investment. And so part of what we'll bring back is sort of a baseline investment and then an enhanced investment, so that we're not just asking for everything at once.
Thank you. And savings costs are music to my ears, so thank you for enabling us to see both sides of it.
Right. And actually, that just brings up a point that you said that for any additional, the budget or expenses will be actually cost neutral. And my question to you is, if you're finding cost savings or you're creating cost savings in non-IT groups or departments, are you factoring that into your cost neutral equation?
Yeah, I'm trying to claim them.
Because
if we can,
I think it's a legitimate case to be made that if you're saving cost in another department based on your IT investment, then it should be an offset.
We agree, and part of the reason that we've asked Rob to be a CIO as opposed to merely an IT director is an IT implies a sort of back office perspective, and what Rob has brought is really a business focus and a business impact perspective. So to the extent that we're making investments that result in cost savings, I think frankly theoretically it'd be an interesting discussion to have, because you could make the argument that some of those cost savings should accrue to the department, some of those cost savings should accrue to maybe the IT, and some of them should go back to sort of the greater good. But I think it's an interesting discussion. At this point, to be clear, what we typically do is just sweep cost savings back into the general and then think about how we reallocate them. But I think it's an interesting policy question.
Great. Thank you. And so we have another speaker, Roxana Marachi.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. How much time do I have?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, great, thank you. So I've been following some of the research. So Roxana Marachi, I'm an education researcher, also the education chair of the San Jose Silicon Valley NAACP, and I've been following a lot of the intersections of technology, progress, privacy, and concerns, and also harm to communities of color. There's a book, Automating Inequality, by Virginia Eubanks, that has recently come out, how high-tech tools profile, police, and punish the poor. And there are a lot of concerns about algorithms that are used that may be disenfranchising already disenfranchised communities. So my request is that in the process that you're laying out for this project, if there could also be some kind of a report on algorithmic transparency, so we know what kinds of equations are being used to try to determine what kinds of outputs there are in terms of what's going to be cost savings and things like that. So I'd like to advocate for algorithmic transparency. Also to look at the privacyinternational.org website. They have some documents with expressing serious concerns about privacy and data security. And if there might be a gap analysis of what their recommendations are, it's quite troubling to see how many serious concerns there are about the privacy and data security issues related to smart cities. So I hope that there will be serious consideration of those. I'm glad to hear that in the April meeting there will be a privacy report. Please integrate the work of privacyinternational.org into the work that you're doing here in the city, and pay attention in terms of the outcomes of the potential costs to our communities of color and disenfranchised communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to accept the report, please?
So moved.
Did you have another?
Yeah, could I, thank you.
There's
Mr.
one-
Chair, I just wanted to respond. I think that was a very thoughtful comment, and I just wanted to follow up. I know that we're still getting our bearings here and getting up and running, and as we think, I'm thinking about the very limited cases where we've actually been using algorithms to. I think, for example, in our housing inspections process, as I understand it, we are using algorithms to help housing inspectors better find unsafe housing. But I think there's probably a limited number of cases, and I'm guessing, is there any reason why we can't make it transparent to the public how we're prioritizing in that case, or what the model looks like?
We absolutely can. I think that the point of sort of being as open source as you can, both on what the actual data results are and how you got that data, because algorithms are not neutral. They are based on values and ways of thinking about things, as is any other decision-making mechanism. So it seems perfectly appropriate that as we put out information, that we also put out what the underlying assumptions or algorithms that were behind those, as you would with any kind of robust study. That seems appropriate.
Okay, thanks, Kim.
More questions coming. Councilmember Depp.
Sorry, no question. Just kind of to tag on to the discussion on the floor. I also think that it's important to have that transparency, but also there was actually an article in The Economist about this very topic, like maybe 2 or 3 issues ago, and it was discussing how algorithms are kind of controlling outcomes, and it's kind of a black box because we get these results, you input it in a black box. You get this result, you're not exactly sure what went into making that decision, but more increasingly computers are kind of deciding how humans and societies live our lives. And it went through this kind of fascinating kind of breakdown of everything. But the takeaway for me from that article was we need to be concerned, but not overly concerned with it, because the original black box is just the human mind. And as before we had machines, we had humans, and we could never really peer into the mind of judges or lawyers or whatever people who are making decisions about society anyway. And so this is a problem that we've confronted before, and we'll make it through. Thank you.
Thank you. So we had a motion and a second. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. All right.
Thank you, Council.
You get to stay.
Committee.
Okay, so citywide data architecture.
Right, since we're so interested in data, I thought we'd keep talking about it.
Let's do it.
So I'd like to invite up some of our folks who are our thought leaders within the city on how we think about data and how we think about making it useful for our residents and our businesses and our visitors. So I have up with me both Erica and Artie, who are going to walk through the current state of our citywide data architecture with a bit of a pointing toward the future. Erica, I believe you'll kick us off.
Thank you, Kip. Good afternoon, Mayor, committee members, and members of the public. Erica Garafo, Data Analytics Lead, Office of Civic Innovation. As you've seen many times before, our 3 tenets are champion the customer, learn through data, and iterate to improve. Central to all of this work is learning through data. Data is both the engine upon which our smart city runs, and it is the fuel that keeps it running. Without data, nothing runs very well. From data, we can develop patterns. From patterns, we gain insights. And from these insights, we can take action to build a smarter city, a more prepared city, a city as innovative as the community that we serve. To achieve this vision, we need to invest in people, processes, and technology. And we'll cover examples of all 3 throughout this presentation. First, a bit about technology. From IoT to development services, we cannot hope to achieve the ambitious goals laid out in the Smart City vision without investing in the foundational data infrastructure. Even our basic city operations are hindered without reliable data discovery and storage. As Kip mentioned earlier, thinking about last year's flood recovery, the Emergency Operations Center needed data on which homeowners had pulled permits, which properties had been yellow tagged, which apartments are under rent controlled, and who had received victim relief assistance. Because these data sets reside in separate, unlinked databases, greater effort was required to understand the whole picture, and valuable time was lost. We were able to mitigate this with human capital, but when the big earthquake hits, the scale of effort will be 10 times larger, and we won't be able to brute force it as easily. Access to reliable, accurate, and comprehensive data about our city is critical to running our city effectively, and we need to get good at it during the good times so that when the next emergency hits, we'll be ready. One example of where we've made good strides in our process and technology is in building out phase 1 of our master addressing database. It may seem obvious that a city should know all of the addresses within its borders, but to put this in perspective, it took Boston 8 years and $8 million to complete their addressing database. I'm happy to report that over the past 2 years, our Public Works GIS team has made really great progress on our own addressing records. The team added over 100,000 missing addresses. We now have records for locations that we never had before, such as in mobile home parks. The foundation has been laid with good data on current technology and an improved process that will allow for connections to our other city data systems. If you can imagine how important it is for the city to have accurate addressing data housed in a system that enables us to easily add, update, and extract data, imagine how important it is for us to do the same for permitting, payroll, budget, public safety. Every city department creates and maintains rich data that we need access to in order to begin to learn from data, display patterns, generate insights, and take action.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Council members, and member of the public. I'm Aarti Tangri. I'm the data architect with City's IT department. Citywide data architecture has been designed with the goal of being highly adoptable by using open source technology, being able to scale at IoT needs, being secure at all levels, and being able to share the data by means of cataloging and publishing. In May 2017, we kicked off a proof of concept project with Dell EMC under City's demonstration policy. Dell EMC provided the city with the hardware on loan, on which they set up components supporting the architecture. The software used on this environment was all open source and non-proprietary, which gives City an advantage of being able to use the open source technology that allows for Lego-like plug-and-play features with high standards of security. The phase 1 of project development ended in summer, and City completed the testing in fall last year. However, the hardware was on loan and was returned last month. The first iteration of the project was successful but was conducted on borrowed hardware. In the current state, City has the application and software supporting part of the architecture, but is missing the hardware to run it on, and hence the project status was reported as red. The work on citywide data architecture was initiated with the goal of providing City with an integrated data platform that streamlines City's data flow by providing a mechanism for data aggregation, data sharing, and data analytics. This would help facilitate learning through data by making multi-use data easily accessible to city employees and enhance a data-driven culture throughout the city. Here is a simplified proposed architecture. City's current data residing in files, databases, and cloud would be moved to the data lake via an ETL or extract transform load tool. Data lake comprises of Hadoop, which is an inexpensive way of storing huge amounts of data of any kind with enormous processing power, and Hawk, which provides a SQL-like interface to work with the data in Hadoop. Hawk enables the data to be easily accessible by a simple querying mechanism. As part of the phase 1 of the pilot project, we designed the architecture, and were able to set up a data lake and a data portal working independently, along with open source ETL tool. Citywide Data Architecture document has been published on City's website and is open for more inputs from the community. Based on our learning from the pilot, I would now like to move our focus from past to future. With the influx of IoT devices, data is expected to grow exponentially, and City needs to be better prepared for it. Let's consider the volume of data created just in transportation. Every autonomous car on the road by 2020 is expected to generate 2 petabytes of data each year, and a single airplane will generate 40 terabytes of data daily. This is a growth chart of number of devices over last 2 to 3 decades globally. With our current infrastructure for supporting the data needs, we are years behind with our capabilities to be able to utilize the data from these devices to its full potential. It is necessary but not sufficient to create a data architecture. What we need is a comprehensive data strategy. And for that, we need to look at data management as a whole, which I would like to break down into 3 elements: data infrastructure and storage, data visibility and analytics, and data governance. Data management is about increasing visibility of data across the enterprise, offering improved visibility to internal and external customers, as well as compliance with regulations. It is about being able to easily access accurate data that comes from siloed, heterogeneous systems in a secure manner. In the new IoT world, City faces the challenge of being able to scale with the real-time data that would be generated by these devices while maintaining the data privacy and security. Let's consider the first element of our data strategy. Data storage can be on-premise or on cloud. Both come with their own advantages and disadvantages. Depending on the security, size, and usage, a hybrid storage would serve the purpose. City's cost of data storage would depend on the number of IoT devices being used, edge storage on the devices, and City's record retention requirements. In order to be able to support these requirements, City needs to be able to invest in the infrastructure, and with the new infrastructure, there will be a need to train the existing staff for maintenance and support, and potentially hiring new staff for advanced skills. To put things into perspective, let's consider video surveillance cameras on street light poles. Each surveillance camera, on an average, generates 2 gigabytes of data per hour, which amounts to roughly 50 gigabytes per day. Considering having 4 cameras on each light pole, if we were to store this data for a full year, we are looking at around 50 to 75 terabytes of data for just 1 year for only 1 light pole. We currently have 69,000 light poles throughout the city. In the past, we've contemplated having sensor cameras on all 69,000 light poles, which would bring our data storage needs to 3,500 petabytes or 3.5 million terabytes per year, which can cost up to a few $100 million in data storage. Practically speaking, though, if we were to add cameras to 25% of the light poles, we are looking at 1,000 petabytes of data. To store data of that capacity, we're looking at a cost of around $10 million. However, not all of this data needs to be stored, which is where edge data processing on individual IoT devices can be very helpful. And based on City's record retention policy, the storage needs could be much lower. Moving on to the second element, data visibility and analytics. Data in itself is not very useful till it is put into perspective. From data to patterns and insights to actions is the eventual goal of data management. Being able to share and use the data in the right way, being able to draw inferences from data is important, and having the right tools to support that is critical. This is where Data Portal becomes an integral part of data management. Data Portal allows for data publishing, storytelling through data, and possibly data sharing, internally and externally, as well as privately and publicly. City currently has 2 data portals, Financial and Open Data Portal, for publishing data, and we are at a point where the cost of these 2 portals over the last 2 to 3 years has exceeded the threshold for competitive bidding. Each of these portals have their own limitations, and having multiple portals serving the same purpose is not the best end-user experience. There is a need to consolidate these portals into one, hence we are planning for an RFP for Open Data Portal later this year, pending funding approval. City currently has analytics tools that serve the purpose of reporting and descriptive analysis. As we start to work with more complex, huge amounts of data and move toward data maturity, there will be a need for advanced analytics that would enable the city to do predictive analysis and use machine learning to convert data to decisions and actions. Moving on to the last piece of our data strategy, data governance. Data governance is the overall management of the availability, usability, integrity, and security of the data employed in an enterprise. Data governance becomes increasingly important as data volumes grow, and City is challenged to ensure a single version of truth exists for each of the critical data domains. Comprised of both people and processes, a sound data governance program helps set clear data ownership and rules of engagement. It is important to treat data as a city asset, and just as any other asset, data needs to be protected as well. City data consists of citizen information, and it is City's responsibility to ensure there is security at each level of data storage, sharing, and access points, and that personally identifiable information is kept secured. Ensuring right people have access to right data both at source level and analytics products is key to effective governance. There is a need for a data policy as well, which is a living document that outlines a broad set of guidelines for how City uses its data, who it can and cannot share it with, and how it maintains the privacy of the data. It sets some ground rules to be followed by City when collecting and sharing data, and also by its constituents on use of the City data. This is where City can get some guidelines around economic benefits of data and data monetization. Data management, being a continuous improvement program, revolves around people, processes, and technology. Having people with the right skills, being able to learn, measure, and communicate, and using the right technology is imperative to success of any organization. Thank you.
So we've spent a fair amount of time discussing the building blocks of creating a data-driven culture. And remember, access to data is just the beginning. The patterns, insights, and action are where we begin to see meaningful change take place. I'd like to next walk you through an example of how we can take action using our data. This year, we piloted a project with the help of University of Chicago's Center for Data Science and Public Policy, aimed at preventing loss of life and property for our most at-risk populations. The pilot explored using code enforcement's multiple housing inspection data to create an algorithm that could predict which buildings were at greatest risk of having serious health and safety violations. Using data from our code enforcement and Amanda systems, the University of Chicago built and evaluated over 100,000 models simulating the impact of different variables on the likelihood of violation. In the end, they found that the amount of time since the last inspection, the incidence of violations in nearby properties, and the absence of recently pulled permits to be the highest determinants in predicting violations. The team compared the machine-generated model against the historical method by testing in the field and found that the machine-generated model was 8% better in its ability to identify properties at risk over the current strategy. To put this in perspective, out of 4,500 multiple housing properties in San Jose, this represents about 360 properties that could be targeted for earlier intervention. The results of this project demonstrate what's possible using advanced analytics, and though we do not currently have the capability to integrate the machine learning model in our current system, we can lay the groundwork for getting there. For example, one of the major roadblocks in this project was the unstructured nature of our data. Information about the severity of a violation was captured in an unstructured text field. Exposed wiring is obviously a bigger deal than a broken light, but both were coded similarly as electrical issues in the current system. Going forward, as the code enforcement system is integrated into Amanda, we are designing the system to capture important data fields such as these in structured fields so that future analysis will be much simpler. Still, and I must emphasize, We do not currently have a person with the data science skills necessary to continue this work. Oops. This example illustrates what's possible with analytics, but before we can act on the insights of our data, we must first invest in our people, processes, and technology to build a culture of data around learning from data. Building our citywide data muscle is not easy, and it will require retooling dozens of disparate data systems and servers and cutting that data over to a new modern data architecture while adding new services and data analytics capability. This investment in a modern approach to data will ultimately save us money and time as we refocus our efforts from numerous disconnected and outdated data storage approaches to a single converged platform infrastructure. We are asking for an investment in our people, our processes, and our technology to help San Jose be a smart city leader and as innovative as the community that we serve. Thank you.
And before we turn it over to questions, I just want to pull out one technical thread because it's kind of cool, but as an illustration of how forward-thinking this work is. So for example, the work that Artie and her team led with Dell EMC, the solution that they came up with, you saw a mention of Hadoop as an example technology. I think that's really spot on. If you were to go to talk to top data scientists at, say, eBay or PayPal and ask them what they were using when they use their data, Hadoop is an underlying technology that they use. So it's smart in that regard that it's the cutting edge technology, but another reason that it's smart is it's an open platform technology. And what that means is that a lot of people are contributing to it and a lot of people are using it. So if we were to use Hadoop as core to our data technology, we'd be in partnership essentially with hundreds and hundreds of other high-tech firms who are also dependent upon that technology. And every improvement that they made to the platform, we would benefit from directly. So we wouldn't be going it alone with a sole source procurement that applies just to us. We'd be joining the right community and building our infrastructure on a foundation that is very, very solid. And that's very distinct from the way that we're doing it today, where our individual databases are not only individual, but each of them have different types of technology, some of which are, most of which are proprietary, and almost all of which are outdated in terms of even some of the licensing requirements to use them. So I just pull that out as a specific example of where I think this sets us up not only to use data better, but to do so in a sustainable way in the long term. So with that, again, we'd be delighted to take any questions or entertain any discussion that the committee might have around this topic.
All right, Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe I just missed it at the end here, but this 2 to 3.5 million, what does that cover? So the initial investment to get us going, or because obviously there's ongoing costs with that, but what does that include?
Yeah, two things. One, we'll come back with more details on the pieces, but this is the estimate of if we want to actually invest in the hardware that required for the data lake, the analytic capability to use that, and some of the governance and policy upgrades that we need. This would be kind of the big swallow that we need to make to take our existing systems and upload them into the new data lake in a sustainable way.
So software analytics, but not people?
I think this includes some of the people required to do that. This is the whole kit and caboodle in terms of what we feel the right level of investment would be in a rough range. And again, we'll come back with more detail and a breakdown of this in future dialogue, but this is our estimate of doing it right.
The startup costs?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any security issues with going with an open source platform over a sole source?
So the underlying technology, there always can be, same as like even if it's proprietary, and we saw like with Intel, open source too, there can be some fundamental security issues that arise, but not more than anything else. So it matters more the way we would build and construct that data. And it is in the industry something that everyone's dealing with, is how do you manage the rights and the granularity and the aggregation of that risk and what you expose. So the fundamental answer to your question is not anything more than anything else. But the broader question is we're still learning how to master this, not only in our country, but in others, and pulling together all those disparate types of data. How do you really see it with that kind of scale and manage it well?
Yeah, and the distinction that I would do is I think there's quite a continuum on open source, right? You can go to GitHub right now and you can use the piece of code that I threw up recently to drive the robot around. No guarantees on that, right? It's got a user community of one. But when you get to something like Hadoop, the advantage of Hadoop is that exactly the type of people who are worried about that are looking and combing through this code in every iteration, every single day, commenting and contributing. So it wouldn't be us alone. And in fact, we have lots of really smart eyes on this particular piece of open source. So I think open source with a small user community actually can be very risky. Open source with a very established user community that's very concerned about security, which Hadoop is actually probably less risky than some of the proprietary pieces because those discussions are had quickly and out in the open.
And if I can add one thing, Kip's absolutely right, because there's also a lot of industry support for these. So it's not just passionate people. You have a lot of a corporate investment into some of these open source technologies because they're communal.
Thank you. That's really helpful, because I kind of get the sense that we would be, when we have our data centralized in a data lake, that makes us a more interesting target, right? Because with everything decentralized and people not really knowing where to look for things, we're not as interesting a target for hacking, right?
Correct. The honeypot gets bigger, but the way the construct is we also have designed the open data community architecture to be forked. So there's some stuff that would be internal, some stuff would be cloud providers, whoever the best video analytics or audio analytics might be. It wouldn't all just be in one pot, and we wouldn't expose all of it. But there was some careful attention paid to what's the build of it, that we would create those data lakes, but not put everything in one spot, that if you can raid that, you've got the full family set of jewels that are prone.
And that's where the governance piece becomes so important, of being very clear on who has access and how that security is handled, rather than just sort of everybody assuming that they have access to the data because they happen to be in the department. So that's where that attention to the detail on the security and the privacy sides are super important, and a really robust governance model that trains people well in how to do that.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Back on slide 7, when you just first started talking about the architecture and the pilot, maybe I just can't remember the details, but what did we pilot? And then it seems so sad to have to return hardware, but what did we pilot and what did we get out of that in terms of long-term? Like, I think what I heard is we now have a structure for our architecture, or at least we know what it is, know what it should be on paper. But if we don't implement that immediately, how does that value erode over time?
So in terms of what we got out of that solution is we have a platform where we can actually bring all our data together, so like a data lake platform, and then a data portal which is independent. So, well, the phase 2 of the project was to bring a connection between the two. But in terms of being able to use that, we actually need resources to bring that back up in a new environment. And then because it's all open source, if we have the right resources to work on that technology to bring it back up, upgrading it to a newer technology shouldn't be a challenge.
And the only thing I would add to that, Artie's absolutely right, is we also have a philosophy that we have 93,000 local governments in the country. And if you count local government, cities, counties, districts, you name it, 80+% of those are under 60,000 in population. So how can we share and make data a real currency that we can trade off and answer questions in an automated way, in a shared way, that the data sets are enriching because more people are participating? And so we brought that idea forward and said it needs to be open source so everyone can use it and more people can participate. It needs to be able to be secure. It needs to be able to be IoT scalable. And if we have this, then can we coalesce some of our friends and partners from other cities and communities to say, here's a standard? And the dream is then you could create data lakes around specific purposes because we finally have a foundation that is consistent across multiple jurisdictions. So could there be around disaster data? where there's a standard format for it, and we can share it because there's data management and security management, but there's a willingness to share it and have other people use it and build solutions on it, because for the first time, we're not solving disaster data every disaster. And it might be the same thing with crime or traffic or those types of things too. So Dell EMC really liked the concept and said, we'll spot you the temporary hardware, and amen, we really didn't want to see it go, and we tried to convince them how wonderful it would be for them to just leave it here. They remembered it though. And so the work is we're going to publish this, get more people to weigh in on it, so it is kind of like an open source reference architecture, but try to get more and more people to use it. It'll be our foundation. We want it to be the foundation for others. We're meeting with Santa Clara County here in the next few weeks to say, might you use this too, so we can build these assets together.
And in terms of freshness, I think these concepts, there is a rapid evolution in this area, so you'd want to get actionable in this as soon as possible. I do think it will be viable for a number of years, but the two things you miss if you don't take action on this is, one, you lose the internal knowledge and momentum around it, and then two, you begin making parallel investments in other data sets, which make it harder and more resistant for legitimate reasons to cut over to the main piece. So because we've underinvested in the other data systems, this is actually a good time to do that kind of cut over rather than increasing parallel investment. So I say from a technical standpoint, we've probably got a 2 to 3 year window on freshness, but from a momentum standpoint, we have more of a 12 to 18 month piece that you'd like to really build on this momentum before you lose it internally.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the mayor had 3 tough questions, but he left, so you dodged that bullet. I actually, my first question is really, I know the subject of privacy is coming up quite a bit, and based on a lot of the articles I've read and reading books and on this subject, the focus has tended to be on an aggregate of the data to make decisions. So wouldn't that be our focus when we utilize this data on an aggregate basis versus individual specific case basis? Whether someone knows that I told my wife I was going to the library and I was actually at the neighborhood club or whatever. Would it be that level of detail in terms of what we would be able to store and track? And you don't have to comment on that.
I don't know that I have an easy answer for that one. I'm gonna say that's exactly the kind of question that we're wrestling with around data security and privacy, right? Because some things you do need very specific information, right? If you're talking about licensing pet owners, you need to know who that pet owner is and where their pet is. If you're talking about things like gathering information on people moving around, you want to very quickly disaggregate that or have that not be personally identifiable. But that really is part of the bigger privacy question, I think, and security question that I'd love to engage with both the committee and the community more broadly as we move forward on this. Because I think the only thing I would say that perhaps is relevant is that one way to think about it is you think of utility of data, right? And then on each side, one side you have privacy, and one side you have security. The more sure you are about privacy and security, the less utility you have out of the data. And that's not a bad thing, that's just simply a descriptor, right? Because if I have absolute security and absolute privacy, then I really don't have much use for the data. So you have to think about these things in relationship to each other. And therefore, I think one of the important things for us to do in terms of usability is to be very clear what are the use cases, and to delineate why are we using the data and for what purpose, and then rather than just say we want data for data's sake. So I'll leave that as a prelude to April.
Okay. And then last question is on the investment of $2 million to $3.5 million. Isn't this effort the cornerstone of what we're trying to do in terms of becoming a smart city? And if we don't pursue this, wouldn't it hamper our efforts to move forward with our vision?
Absolutely correct. This is foundational, and without the ability to learn through data, that's one of the reasons it's one of our 3 key innovation behaviors. We really can't do the innovation either individually or at scale in the way that it's been challenged us to do. It's simply a necessary component of the work.
Thank you. And we have a couple of speakers, Blair Beekman. And then after Blair is Victor Sin. and then Roxana Marachi.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Victor Sin. I'm a resident of San Jose and also the chair of the Santa Clara Valley chapter of the ACLU of Northern California. The citywide data architecture presentation suggests a significant expansion in data capacity and quotes as an example of sensor data that there may be 50 gigabytes per year per street light for 69,000 street lights. This is a lot of data. The presentation also mentions data sharing in the diagram in page 7. This begs for policy questions such as determination that benefits outweigh costs, determining what types of low-level data should be destroyed after data analysis and data abstraction have completed, and data retention policy, among other things. I'm glad to see that in this presentation and also in some other presentations in this committee that there is a plan to develop a data policy. This is an important first step before deploying or implementing any technology that is capable of collecting massive amounts of data and capable of monitoring and recording residents. I encourage the council members to take one step further and to take this opportunity to develop and enact a robust and comprehensive surveillance technology ordinance like that of the County of Santa Clara and the cities of Oakland, Berkeley, and Palo Alto. That has the key elements of requiring cost-benefit analysis as the very first step, requiring transparency, accountability, and oversight. I also look forward to attending the April meeting where data policy will be discussed. Thank you very much.
Roxana? Or Blair?
Yeah, those are the words that I try to offer to you guys all the time. It's just my bread and butter, and it's just really important to me. And yeah, there's a lot of streetlight technology, and there's a lot of data analytic technology in this as well that you're talking about on this item. And I really wanted to bring up the point that say Deb Davis 6 months ago, she got very, very worried about the future of the rental registry program for the housing department. For as great as you're developing the tenants' rights programs and stuff like that, there's been some serious human rights questions about the rental registry program and how the data it's going to collect. I just hope, there's been some compromises probably, but I hope in those compromises, the key has been that we're at the beginning of a new era, and we need to talk about what is human rights again, and what is civil rights, and what is the everyday rights of everyday people in this data collection process that we're all embarking on. And so I hope your data analytics really keep in mind the ideas of human rights and civil rights, and those can be really important keywords and watchwords to look for, and as you're building up your security systems, where people will be looking at each other and what to do. They'll be looking at, hey, is that good human rights? And things like that. So I hope you look for those things in the rental registry and all that kind of stuff, and in the data analytics, and good luck in your work. Thank you.
Thank you. Roxana?
Hello again, Roxana Marashi, education researcher and education chair of San Jose Silicon Valley NAACP. I grew concerned when I saw Hadoop. I looked at, first of all, let me just acknowledge the good work of the team here at the Smart Cities. Everyone's doing, I think, the best work that they can on this. I am concerned about Hadoop in terms of security data issues. So I did a simple search and found a few articles that came to the top. One is from 2011 11, it's a while back, IT must prepare for Hadoop security issues. Aggregating data from multiple sources can cause access control and data entitlement problems, analysts say. Another one from 2015, CIOs still don't care about Hadoop data security. Hadoop is big but won't go mainstream until it resolves its glaring security issues. The most recent one was from 2017, January of 2017. Hackers said to target and wipe data on insecure Hadoop installations. And there's been attempts at hacking some of these big data sets. So I would encourage a halt on the vote of this, if it's going to be voted on soon, until there is a full and thorough confirmation that the security data gaps have been addressed and closed. There's some sort of a report from Hadoop of what have these violations been and what has been done since. I would also encourage a data ethics canvas process in this work. So you can look up data ethics canvas. Oftentimes there's privacy policies that are just extremely long, and you scroll through and you're not really reading it and you say, okay, right? And I'm concerned that if we take that kind of an approach at a systemic city level, we're gonna let some things get lost through the cracks, and we may be just handing over our data to other companies. And so a data ethics canvas is where anyone who's partnering with us on this smart cities technology, and apparently there are some big corporations that are, that there is a forward-thinking kind of here's how we are going to share the data, who will be seeing the data. And instead of through hidden in a privacy policy somewhere, have it be upfront. These are the folks who will be accessing the data. These are the folks who will not have access, and if they have access, there's gonna be some consequences. Things like that. I really am very concerned about this. I don't know if it's a juncture of voting at this point, but please make sure that these security clear violations that have already happened are gonna be taken care of before there's any kind of approval at a citywide level. Thank you.
Thank you, Roxanne. And we're just, we would be approving their report. We're not approving anything in additional to that. So rest assured that the team is diligently exploring all options in terms of how to have a robust policy, privacy policy, and how that's implemented. So any other questions? If not, I'd like to get a motion.
Second.
Oh, been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, it's been approved. So now we're on to open forum and Blair Beekman.
Thank you for this meeting today. It was informative. I'll be really looking forward to April. It's my real hope that with the IoT program, things seemed a little off this month. I'm hoping this can really be a year. I've been really trying to stress and emphasize with things like the technology ordinance, it can really create an openness with the community that the city council and the police chief himself has been saying that they can't quite bridge and connect, and they've been looking for ways to do this. I think the technology ordinance is a really nice way, and it's just one of several ways, several models and structures that can help your city make a more open and public process for yourselves and everybody, and make this a good process for all of us. And this includes the IoT plans coming up in April, and just this entire year I just hope can be a way that we can begin to talk about better connections and trust connections, better ways to trust. Yeah, good luck with that. Finally, there is stuff about in downtown San Jose, there's technology that is using eavesdropper and shot spotter technology first in Santa Clara, that there is no gunfire in downtown San Jose, hardly ever. And I'm just shocked that this is a VTA board decision and that city council members of San Jose are on, and they're allowing this technology to take place in our city. And I'm just appalled that you've allowed this to happen. And I really hope that you guys can make the effort to take this technology out as soon as possible. And it's just a cheap experiment, and you'll be ending it very soon, please.
Thank you, Blair.
Yes.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.